When you find yourself in dangerous company, you may not recognize when you're in harm's way. But when you're in an environment where violence is common, it doesn't mean you deserve to end up dead or that you don't deserve justice. Unfortunately, for 41-year-old Ricky McCormick, whose life was rife with disadvantage, bad decisions, and dangerous people, that's exactly what happened. His body was found in a vacant field on June 30th, 1999 by a passerby in West Alton, Missouri. The location of his body, along with the mysterious notes found in his pocket, told police they were dealing with homicide. Today on Dark Matters, the mysterious death of Ricky McCormick. Ricky McCormick was born on June 14, 1958, to his parents, Frankie and Charles McCormick. He had no siblings of his own, but his cousin, Charles, was practically a brother. Yet he struggled to fit in at school and often spent recess alone. Ricky was known for his active imagination, and he would fabricate and exaggerate stories, but he remained an outsider throughout his education. When he dropped out of high school, he could hardly read, and the most he could write was his name. After dropping out, Ricky bounced between several cities along the eastern Missouri border before ending up in downtown St. Louis. And while he wasn't exactly close with his parents, he had his aunt, Gloria McCormick, to turn to during harder times. Gloria recalled thinking of Ricky as a vampire, as many of the odd jobs he took mopping floors, washing dishes, or bussing tables forced him to sleep all day and wake at night. But Ricky's nighttime occupations didn't keep him out of trouble. By the time he was 41, Ricky had fathered 4 children, 2 in the early 1990s with a 14-year-old, a crime for which he was convicted on a felony first-degree sexual abuse charge. He spent 11 months of his 3-year sentence in Farmington Correctional Center and was released in 1993. Ricky continued to add to his list of bad decisions and began running drugs with dangerous dealers in St. Louis to make ends meet. Living off of drug money and disability checks he received for his chronic heart issues, in 1999 Ricky was an ex-convict, unemployed, in dangerous company, and struggling with his physical health. And friends and family also believed he suffered from an untreated mental illness. But still, no one could have predicted what a mysterious and horrible fate he was about to suffer. June 24th of 1999 would be a day Ricky's Aunt Gloria would remember forever, as it was the last time she would see her nephew alive. The next day, on the 25th, Ricky arrived at the Forest Park Hospital. He was wheezing and had shortness of breath. The doctor diagnosed him with an asthma flare-up and released Ricky, who stayed in the emergency room until the next morning, on the 26th. Then, around 11:30 a.m., he called his girlfriend, Sandra Jones, and told her he was going to grab lunch. On the 27th of June, Ricky is spotted at a gas station and subsequently disappears. Yet, despite his sudden radio silence, no relatives or friends report him missing. But on June 30th, a woman driving down Route 367 near a field stumbled across the badly decayed body of Ricky McCormick. Police weren't shocked by the location of the body, as the field was a popular dumping ground for murder victims, but upon investigating the body and the evidence, it's a mystery that would haunt many of them for the rest of their lives. Looking at Ricky's remains, the medical examiner concluded he had died hours after he was last seen on the 27th. His body had decayed at an alarmingly rapid rate, most likely due to the summer heat. From the 27th through the 30th, the humidity levels were high and temperatures ranged from 80 to 64 degrees Fahrenheit. Ricky was very thin and only stood at 5 feet 6 inches tall, and by the time he was found, only 72 pounds of flesh remained. Police had to identify him by his fingertips, which had fallen off of his hands and were on the ground next to him. The level of decomposition forced the coroner to label Ricky's cause of death as undetermined. Something I think is important to note here. Ricky may have smoked through a pack of cigarettes a day and downed nearly 20 caffeinated drinks every 24 hours, but he didn't partake in the drugs he dealt, and steered clear of alcohol as well, which was confirmed by the family members. There was nothing to indicate his death was caused by a deadly concoction of substances. And authorities were not surprised to find a body in that particular field, as several murdered women had turned up there in previous years, but they were surprised to find Ricky there. He didn't drive a car, and his body was 15 miles away from his home, far out of the range of any public transportation systems. And despite the suspicious circumstances of Ricky's demise, police had no leads, and the case moved to the bottom of the priority list, where it would collect dust for the next 12 years. 12 years later, most of the public had never heard of or had forgotten about Ricky McCormick's death, but the interest peaked again on March 29, 2011, when the FBI reclassified his death as a homicide after confirmation he died from a gunshot wound. Perhaps what caught the public eye most, however, was the strange new information that came to light concerning Ricky's murder. When police found Ricky's body in 1999, they also recovered 2 notes in his pockets. The messages were a mess of random letters and numbers that made no coherent sense, but police wondered if there was a hidden meaning behind them. Feeling it was over their investigative skills, authorities turned the notes over to the FBI, without mentioning the evidence to the public or even to Ricky's family members. The chief of FBI's Cryptanalysis and Racketeering Records Unit, better known as CRRU, Dan Olson, concluded that A. Ricky authored the letters within 3 days of his murder, B. that the notes were written in a complex cipher, and C. that they could possibly reveal the circumstances behind Ricky's murder. After over a decade of failed attempts to decode the cipher by both the CRRU and the American Cryptogram Association, the FBI hoped the public might be able to view the notes with fresh eyes and solve the riddle. The response from the masses was so unexpected that the FBI actually had to set up a separate page on their website to accept tips and suggestions, rather than be flooded by the calls and emails. People mainly focused on what they thought was the key to the cipher, a string of characters and numbers in parentheses ending in the letters NCBE, near the numbers 71, 74, and 75. Some thought they referenced VIN or vehicle identification numbers, while others said that they were gaming notes, car parts, or highways out of the St. Louis area. The FBI thought the heavy use of the letter E might indicate it was being used as a spacer, but while the public and FBI were trying to decipher the codes, the media wanted a better profile of Ricky himself and spoke with his remaining family members. At the time, it was widely circulated that Ricky's family told the authorities he was very interested in complex code writings his entire life and would encrypt notes as a child. However, his family claimed this was false reporting. Ricky's father, Charles, had mentioned to the police that he would sometimes scribble, but beyond that he couldn't even spell and had never known Ricky to write in any sort of code. His mother, Frankie, was quoted saying, "The only thing he could write was his name. They told us the only thing in his pockets was the emergency room ticket. Now, 12 years later, they come back with this chicken scratch shit." Charles and Frankie greatly doubted that Ricky was the author of the notes. Despite the parents' claim, the FBI said that they had every confidence that Ricky was the author of the notes based on their analysis. Even if he were just writing down a grocery list and it provided nothing to the case, they would still want to unravel the complex cipher, as it was obviously unlike anything they'd ever seen before. Ever since the FBI's official release of Ricky's letters back in 2011, the mysterious notes have continued to tug at the curiosity of internet sleuthing communities. As of 2016, 17 years after Ricky's murder, the letters remain shrouded in mystery. However, people who've extensively followed the case tend to split into 2 different theories about the murder and the notes. Some see Ricky's involvement in local, violent drug circles as a possible reason behind his murder. In 1999, Ricky's girlfriend, Sandra Jones, told police Ricky would transport drugs to Orlando, with his most recent trip being 2 weeks before his murder on June 15, 1999. Only when he returned home this time, he seemed shaken. He said he was holding the drugs for Abaha Hamdallah, a gang member and notoriously violent criminal in the St. Louis area. At the time, Hamdallah was linked to several shootings, and based on Ricky's behavior, Sandra suspected that something had gone wrong with the deal in Florida. This seems to fall in line with Ricky's behavior in the days leading up to his death, as he checked himself into hospitals both on the 22nd and 25th, possibly seeking safety from the men who may have been after him. Ricky also had possible ties to a drug dealer named Gregory Lamar Knox, who ran his dealings close to where Ricky lived. Police heard from a confidential informant that Knox had murdered a black man working at a gas station and later disposed of the body near West Alton, around the same area Ricky was found. But from behind bars, Knox claimed he had no information to help with Ricky's case. Baha Hamdallah could never conclusively be linked to Ricky's death, as he relocated to Cleveland in order to try and begin anew following a murder charge. But whether or not Ricky could be tied to Hamdallah or Knox, many who believe his murder was the result of a drug deal gone wrong also believe that the notes in Ricky's pocket weren't authored by him. As many internet commenters point out, Ricky was nearly illiterate, a fact corroborated by his parents. Expert cryptographer Ilanka Dunnan studied the notes, and she doesn't believe Ricky had the mental capacity to write in such a complex cipher. She theorized he was merely carrying the message from one party to another, or that the message was planted on Ricky's body in order to throw police off. On the above top-secret discussion boards, a user speculated on the idea that the use of NBCE in the notes could stand for no cash being exchanged, or that to some degree, the message was partially in a drug dealer's shorthand, slang for exchanges, buyers, etc. With this, there are still missing pieces to the case. If Ricky were transferring a message of such significant importance that it needed to be coded, why kill him and leave the note behind? It's possible the notes were read and replanted, but it seems strange to leave behind anything that might link Ricky to the local drug rings. And regardless, if Ricky truly didn't write the notes himself, and his murder is the result of being involved with violent men, we're further from unraveling the mystery than we have ever been. Our second theory derives from those who saw Ricky's messages and didn't see a complex cipher or code, but the workings of a mind suffering from mental illness. One commenter said that they'd worked with people who suffered brain injuries, and they would often write gibberish that, to them, makes perfect sense, but to the rest of us, looks like nonsense. Others theorized coding messages to oneself might be associated with certain types of schizophrenia, where there's paranoia involved. There was also talk of bipolar disorder, head trauma, or brain damage of some kind. Some thought that if Ricky was suffering from a mental illness, the notes might have been his way of tracking his medication dosages, or that in combination with his mental illness, he could have also suffered from dyslexia. But while Ricky's family thought he did have a mental illness, there's no record of him being officially diagnosed or treated, meaning he wouldn't have been on any prescribed medication. But prescriptions aside, those around Ricky believed he was dealing with an undiagnosed mental issue. Everyone from his public defender in his sexual abuse case, to his mother, and even his aunt who called him withdrawn. She claimed he'd seen a psychiatrist once, who had said that Ricky had a brick wall in his mind and that he had an active imagination. Ricky's cousin, Charles McCormick, said his cousin often spoke as if he were in another world. The FBI contests this theory, however, with Olson saying, "This means something. We look at a lot of things that are gibberish, arbitrary strikes on a keyboard. This is not that case." But between these two theories, who's to say that Ricky couldn't have been suffering from an untreated mental illness, but also be the victim of a drug-motivated murder? The key to finding out the truth is answering whether or not Ricky himself wrote the notes, and if he did, what do they mean, if anything at all? Unless it is conclusively determined it's one or the other, we're unlikely to find any closure. Unfortunately, the dead aren't always memorialized, and if it weren't for the logbook in the Laurel Hill Memorial Gardens, no one would know Ricky McCormick lay under an anonymous plot with no headstone to mark his life or his passing. There was no sign that family or friends had ever visited Ricky's final resting place. Recalling the last time she saw Ricky, his Aunt Gloria said she wondered if he'd gotten into trouble and was trying to hide from his dangerous bosses. He knew he could have stayed here, but maybe he didn't want to put my life on the line. that in death, maybe he'd made bad decisions, but he kept quiet in order to keep those around him safe. The FBI's CRRU hope that the notes will eventually be decoded, as Ricky's case is within their top 3 priorities of unsolved ciphers. And though they are offering no cash rewards, they are hoping that the mystery in and of itself will be enough to motivate someone to crack the code. To this day, Ricky McCormick's killer has yet to be identified. While authorities know it was a murder, are the notes simply the inner workings of an untreated mental illness, something that distracted away from the actual case itself, or are they the key to solving everything? We may never know for sure, but what we do know is that a mentally troubled criminal ran with the wrong crowd, got killed, and in death never received answers. His murder remains in the shadows, much like the cipher on the notes. Thank you all for giving this case a moment of your time. I think it's important to remember that while we may not always make the best choices in life, if in death we are taken against our will, we all deserve justice of knowing what happened to us. And hopefully someday, whether someone comes forward with more information, or if the note is a cipher, if it's solved, we'll have a better idea of what happened to Ricky McCormick. And as always, I only ask you for respect in the comments as you speculate and discuss among yourselves. And remember, though these may be dark matters, the darkness always matters. Thank you all for watching the video, and if you enjoyed it, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and leave a comment down below. And if you want to see more from me, be sure to subscribe. Also, if you want to see more unsolved cases, you can click on any of the videos you see now. Thank you all again for watching, and stay safe, friends, and have a good night.